Hey y'all, and good now whenever and wherever this finds you. Today I want to start with gratitude, and I had a great gratitude for the algorithm of YouTube that figures out my mix every day, and they play. It's like I just click on my mix, and I just get this list of songs that every one of them I love. So I get that going in the morning, so I have a lot of gratitude for that. And then, as you know, I've been working on studying the empire in we're in the end times of our empire, and along the lines of what I talk about, how when we show up, the universe shows up to support us. And wouldn't you know it, that there's a video from one of the people I watch, Richard Wolff. He's an economist, and he's got his video this week was about empire.
Welcome, friends, to another edition of Economic Update, a weekly program devoted to the economic dimensions of our lives and those of our children. I'm your host, Richard Wolff.
What Professor Wolff is talking about mostly is the English empire.
Today's program is a little bit different. On the one hand, yes, it responds to something that we've been thinking about and looking at for weeks now. And that's namely the passing of the United Kingdom's Queen Elizabeth on the 8th of September of this year, and the enormous media attention that event, the funeral, and so on have garnered, as well as the coming to power of her son Charles III, the new king of that country. But it's different in the sense that I'm going to be looking at it as an event that marks the end of the British Empire. I want to talk about that, partly because it's real history that we ought to think about. And like all history, it's right here with us right now, because the empire role that Britain once played passed then to the United States, formerly part of that empire, and that the United States is now facing the decline of its empire and therefore has a great deal to learn from thinking about the passing of that other one, marked by Queen Elizabeth's death.
And he explains why empires exist.
Why do societies expand like that, especially when the people they take power over don't like it, don't want it, resist it, fight about it? Well, before capitalism, the empires we see were usually created to get something that the society expanding needed. But it had to do with gold, silver, slaves, things that you could grab and take. What's different about capitalism is that it's much more organized, it's much more invasive, it does way more than steal and snatch wealth and people. It does that, but it wants to integrate the area it takes over into its own economy as a subordinate provider. But I want to focus on the modern experience, because what's notable about Britain is its empire was the first modern capitalist empire. So in capitalist colonialism, what you want is to expand. You also needed raw materials. The British Empire developed on the back of one particular commodity, cotton. The British took over the world by producing cotton cloth. And in fact, cotton was the great mechanism of the British Empire. And now you can begin to see how colonialism develops, because the United States had everything but one thing. It didn't have the labor. The indigenous people would not or could not do that kind of work. Plus, the empire, as it came in, found that they were resisting. They didn't want to be workers for the Europeans. They fought, and they were destroyed. It was ethnic cleansing before we had the phrase to name it. So the Indians were exterminated. For 2 centuries, they were exterminated. And that meant that the only way the British could think to provide the labor to do the work of cotton was to bring the labor to the United States. And there goes the great British slave trade to produce the cotton, which the British Empire used to ship all over the world. And all over the world, the British went to say, you can't buy anybody else's cotton. All the Indian production was destroyed by the insistence of the British, who controlled the colony of India, that they had to buy British cotton. That's what you can do in an empire. You can make it very valuable for you. So things you might not associate with the British Empire, slavery, cotton, India, that was all part of integrating a world economy by having European countries mostly take over more and more parts of the world and integrate them into their economies as subordinate places. Wealth was created but wasn't left there. It was shipped to the mother country, which became very rich.
So Richard took a break, and I took a break. I met Stephanie, and she's a wonderful, very wise person. It really affirmed everything that I've been talking about here. I mean, she's living the dream, and so then I went and sat in with Sass, who he did the hearings with Brian, and I also supported him when he ran for Congress. And he now does a weekly Zoom meeting, and I sat in there, so that's where I've been. And I'm back, and so let's pick up with Richard where he's at.
Welcome back, friends, to the second half of today's economic update devoted to the conversation we're having about colonialism and imperialism and all of those kinds of things having to do with empires, in which mostly European countries in the modern period expanded out from the island of Britain or the little country of Belgium to take over vast amounts of the rest of the world, eventually in the process creating, although that's not what they set out to do, a world economy of the sort we live in now. You might think of colonialism as the birth of the modern economy. And like usual, the conditions of birth have a long-lasting effect on what kind of societies you produce. And being born in colonialism is a violent and dangerous way to come into being. And the British Empire exemplifies this. 1952, the British Empire is already in decline and literally falling apart. It has lost its biggest part, India. That's in an enormous, basically 100-year struggle from the mid of the 19th to the middle of the 20th century for India to free itself from Britain, culminating in the passive resistance of Mahatma Gandhi that many of you know about and have admired. It was a violent struggle in which millions of people died, some in direct military repression, which the British tried over and over again to impose on India until they could not anymore succeed, but it wasn't for lack of trying. Their parting gift was to divide the colony into two, India and Pakistan. Pakistan later dividing into Pakistan and Bangladesh. The division, called the partition there, again fraught with enormous conflicts of Muslim and Hindu, of East and West, a legacy that the Indian subcontinent, those countries, are still struggling with in the modern time.
Where I picked up on was that he brings up that the transition of systems are a lot of people die.
social transformations, as I'm about to show you, incur deaths on large numbers, and they always have. In the end, almost every colony fought for and got independence. In a sense, that's history's judgment on how good it is to be a colony of somebody else. It's no good at all.
And I want to say that let's not do that in our transition. Let's make a conscious effort to shift the purpose and focus of our country from empire to becoming the benevolent, generous country that we promised to be. I say we bring home the military and spend that money creating the infrastructure of a sustainable energy system so that we can go back to being producers and give to the world those things that we have and become partners and friends with the rest of the world and let them share with us what they have. Well, that was a good look at empire and how it works, and to realize that the stealing of resources, one country from another, actually stifles the greatest resource that we have, and that is our human potential. And our capitalistic system, where one group lives off of the labor of another group, it doesn't build people up, it tears them down. Imagine a system where we reward people for the benefit that they do, and it's not tied to making profit for someone else, that we all are in this together and that we share in the bounty, and that we create the bounty by reaching our full potential. And that is the system that we need to work on now. What kind of system do we want that's going to build us up instead of tear us down? What kind of system is going to create nations working together to create a better world than one that we have that the nations tear at each other and destroy the process of and waste resources? And don't get me started. I guess that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you down the road.